So before we get started, I know Naris, I know Mel. Carla, what organization are you with?
I'm with Women's Voices Chorus.
Great. And then let's see, we got other people in the waiting room. Hello. Now, Anne, you're with Women's Voices, correct?
Yes.
Mel, are you with Sisters Voices or Women's Voices?
I'm actually Voices, the Chapel Hill Chorus.
Voices.
We're this SATB chorus. Yeah.
The other voices. There's lots of voices.
There are.
We had the name first, by the way.
Well, we are happy to be part of the vibrant musical community here in Orange County.
Absolutely. And just side note, before we get going on this, I hope you guys received the survey that I sent out about we are potentially going to be able to offer a performing arts space here at the Eno Mill. And I've sent a survey out kind of asking about needs and affordability. So it will go to the county commissioners on September 4th. I'll be sending out information before then because we want to have a strong showing of our performing arts community. But yeah, I'm super excited. It's the cloth mill space. I don't know if any of y'all have been in there when it was primarily a wedding venue, but yeah, so it's exciting.
Katie,
Okay,
I'm sorry, did you say you sent that already? Because I didn't get it.
I did. I'll send it to you.
It was several weeks ago at least.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay.
And I thought I sent it to my everybody on the grants list, but I don't
think I saw it either, but it doesn't really apply to Front Gallery, but maybe it would. If it was offered, we could think about programming.
Okay. I'll resend it.
Okay, thank you.
And then I know Heather. I do not know Aisha and Leslie. Would y'all mind introducing yourselves real quick? Let us know what organization you're with.
Hi, yes. My name's Aisha. I am present today for our executive director, Ms. Tova Hairston with Boomerang Youth.
Oh, great. Wonderful.
Hi
Thanks for being here.
How are you? I know Aisha. Yeah, hi.
Hi.
Hi, my name's Leslie Stanford, and I'm a member of Bethlehem Presbyterian Church, which is in southwest Orange County. It is near the intersection of Mebane Oaks Road and Highway 54. And we are now being allowing our church sanctuary to be used for artists and to have artists use our space. And we currently have an art show right now with pottery and paintings, and we're just learning more about how all this works. So I'm just here to listen.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thanks for being here. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'll share my screen. And if y'all hear like recorder music in the background, it's because we've got summer camps going on. Alrighty, so this is the training session for, is it saying waiting in the lot? So I can't see the Teams room with my PowerPoint up. So if anybody else comes in, will someone else admit them, please? And also I can't see you if you raise your hand. So either just jump in and ask a question or jot down your questions and then we'll answer them at the end. I do have a lot of FAQs towards the end of this that are most likely going to answer your questions, but we will have time at the end. So, all right, so we're here to talk about the Grassroots Arts Program. this funds our organizations, our arts organizations, community organizations, our schools, and in some cases, our municipalities. This is different from our other primary grants program, which is our artist project grant. And those grants fund individual artists. And that training is on Thursday night at 6 o'clock on Teams. So just in case any of y'all are individual artists too, you might want to tune in for that.
Yeah, I will come on to that. Yeah.
So this reiterates what I just said. And I should say, our artist project grants, they put money in the hands of artists to do community projects. They are different than the other two grant projects that we are a part of with Durham Arts Council, which are the Artist Support Grant and the Emerging Artist Grant. Those give more artistic professional development funding to artists, whereas ours are money to do community projects led by artists. So that's the big difference there. So available funding this year. The amount of funding we have available from the state is $47,978. Orange County has its outside agencies allocation. Ours has stayed the same for the last several years at $29,711. I'm working very hard to get a set percentage of this fund every year rather than this one very random amount that is also pretty low. It is about 2% of the whole outside agency's budget. And so I am working to try to get more of that fund allocated to the arts. And, you know, would always appreciate your advocacy on that. 15,000 of this will be allocated to our Title I Elementary Artists in Residence program. This puts 6 weeks of artists in residence in all of our Title I elementary schools in Orange County, which is just an incredibly important program. So we allocate 15,000 of that off the top. And so that leaves us $62,689 this year, which I wish we had a lot more. One day we will have a lot more. Because I will tell you, the last few years, like the quality of grant applications is just getting better and better and better. It seems very rare that we are like, what is this? You know, it's more like the top scoring applications are the ones that get funded. And then there's a lot of applications that are completely worth funding. We just don't have enough money to go around. So we're working on changing that. That's also the point. I'm sorry, I keep going off on these tangents, but that's also one of the reasons why we have our nonprofit arm, the Orange County Arts Alliance. One of our future goals is to raise money to help supplement our grant programs. So this year's request limits are 5,000, both for programmatic requests and operations. Timeline, they're open through the month of June. They close on Monday, June 30th, 11:59 p.m. We use Submittable like we have been using for a long time. I think most of y'all are pretty used to that program by now. We will notify everybody in August. Let's see, the meeting where our board makes funding decisions will be on Monday, August 11th. And so I will be working on getting notifications out shortly after that. And then we hope to have them, we try to disperse the funding as quickly as possible, but of course it's the county, so it takes a while. But, you know, we get the ball rolling as soon as notifications are made. And then sometimes it happens in August, sometimes it happens in September. Depends on if you are a new vendor to the county or not. And then in September or October, we will go to the county commissioners and do a grant presentation, and we ask that everybody attend this, at least send one representative from your organization. This is a really impactful moment for the arts when we fill that room with all of us arts people. We go up, we get a big photo with all the county commissioners. It makes them feel good because they're ultimately the ones that are, making a lot of this funding happen. And it's something they really look forward to as well. So if you get funded, please prioritize that meeting. So eligibility, all projects have to take place in Orange County for the benefit of Orange County residents. They have to take place between July 1 of this year and June 30 of next year. And you have to be a nonprofit organization or a group sponsored by a nonprofit. So, artist collectives are eligible as long as they have a 501c3 nonprofit fiscal agent. Public or private schools in Orange County with both school systems. This can come from the school system. It can come from the school itself. It can come from a PTO. It can come, in the case of Chapel Hill Carver City Schools, it can come from their foundation. So it can come through lots of different sources. It can also come directly from a teacher too, if they actually have time to apply for a grant application. And it also can come from town or county government. We have a few organizations in the Triangle that serve multiple counties. And over the last few years, the North Carolina Arts Council has really kind of cracked down on organizations having to apply in the county in which they are physically located. And so if you're an organization that you don't necessarily have a physical location, it is where you are registered with the Secretary of State. So if that's Orange County, you can apply to us. If that's Durham County, you need to apply to Durham. Durham has a lot more money, so it's not necessarily a bad thing. And we got somebody else in the lobby. There we go. You have to have been in operation for 1 year. Organizations that have a budget of over $2 million can only request programmatic support, not operational support. And if you are receiving funding through the North Carolina Arts Council or the Department of Natural Cultural Resources in this upcoming fiscal year, you're generally not able to receive grassroots grants. I say generally because we do have that small pool of county funding, the 29,000, that we technically can allocate to an organization that's also receiving state funding, because it's not state funding, but it's such a small pool that, if I never know exactly where the board's going to lean on things, but I could see where they could feel like, well, this organization's already receiving funding from the state, so we need to allocate our funding to those groups that are not. But it's always worth a shot because we never know what the pool's going to look like. So what they will fund, programmatic expenses, especially artist fees. We always encourage, you to allocate our grants towards artist fees. We want artists to be paid, especially multicultural artists. But, space rental, advertising, marketing, all sorts of things. I will say I've got travel listed on here, but I have found over the years our panel gets a little weird with travel. So if you could allocate it to something else and then use your own funding or other, matching funds to do travel, that typically lands a little bit better. Marketing and publicity is another issue that it's like everybody has an opinion about. And, your organization, your demographics, the channels that you need to get the word out through. But sometimes people think that they know. And so I don't want somebody to not get funded because you're asking to, you know, run social media ads. And then somebody on the panel says, well, why are they doing that? That's not the best way to use their money. So again, it's allowable, but I would, just say that a safe bet is always going to be paying artists. Operating expenses, you have to be an arts organization. So a organization with arts in your mission statement in order to apply for operating expenses. And that can be salaries, office supplies, utilities, really, you name it, we can cover it. So there are a good amount of things that the grants cannot fund. And these are, state guidelines, and a few that I want to point out are capital expenditures. During the pandemic, they had taken that off the list. It is now back on the list. Equipment, it's just equipment. Don't really know what that means. If you have a really big need for a piece of equipment, let's talk about it, and I'll try to get an answer from them on, what exactly does that mean? Fundraising events cannot be funded through these grants. Food and beverages cannot be funded. And then with the schools, because the idea is that schools should be providing school supplies and art supplies. And we all know that that may or may not, be happening, but we still can't spend state money on that. And then scholarships. Scholarships are, well, I'll talk more about that in a minute, why they're not fundable. So the one thing to know is that artistic merit is the number one factor that is looked at with our grants. If you don't submit work samples, you will most likely not get funded because we don't have anything to, judge artistic merit on. So even if it's a new event, a new program, you've never done it before, you've done other programs and you've done other events, you've had other exhibits, those prior artists that you've worked with should be your work samples, because that says, here's who we have worked with in the past. Look at their quality. Look how great they are. We know how to pick good artists. With these grants, a one-to-one cash match is required. In kind can be contributed towards this match, which I'll talk more about in a minute. I do recommend letters of support if you're involving any other organization, or like a space. If you're trying to have a concert at the Arts Center, get a letter of support from the director of the Arts Center saying, yes, we are aware of this. We've, told them that they are welcome to have their program here, because it shows that, you've kind of gotten things in place, you've done your homework, and that it's going to be allowed to happen, because there has been situations in the past where somebody applies and, they assume they're going to be able to use a space, and then they can't. And then they come back and say, we thought we could use a space and now we can't. So those key, we don't expect you to have all the details worked out, but those really important key details, like location of where you're going to host something, you probably should have that worked out before you submit your grant. Operations requests, again, are only allowed from arts organizations. And then please be mindful of accessibility. All projects have to take place in ADA approved locations. Just an ADA is very important, and it is not adequate. So think about your location and think about, would people with limited mobility be able to access this space? Would people with low vision be able to access this space? Audio descriptions are really important for people with low vision, closed captioning for low hearing, sensory friendly performances for neurodiverse. This is becoming more and more common, and there's so many resources out there that can help you with this. Another organization in the Triangle is Arts Access, and they do this exact work. So, consider using them as a resource. And then, acknowledge preferred pronouns. So if you've got name badges or you've got signage, make sure to include people's preferred pronouns. So priorities for funding. These are by the state. The first priority is arts organizations. Our second priority is going to be arts and education programs. So this is our schools, school foundations. Third priority are civic, municipal, or non-arts community-based organizations. And by being third priority, that does not mean that they don't get funded, because they absolutely do. It just is part of the rubric. It counts towards 10% of your overall score where you land on this priority list. But yeah, we encourage all types of organizations to apply. So how they're reviewed, we have a financial review panel that looks just at the financials, and you end up getting a financial score, which counts towards 10% of your overall score. So they're looking at, the documents we ask for you to upload, like your P&L and your budget. If you're asking for the full 5,000, we ask that you upload your most recent 990. This is a really important part of the overall review process. And if you've got, like, there's a space on the application that asks, do you have a deficit this year? Or do you have a surplus? And if so, tell us why. And I'm always surprised how many organizations have one of those situations and they don't fill that part out. And it's really important, especially if you have a deficit. Deficits happen, and especially right now. It's not necessarily gonna, kick you out of the running, but like, we just need to know what is the reason. And most of the time it's a very understandable reason. But when you don't fill that out, that makes us think like, well, geez, I wonder if they know why they have a deficit or a surplus, because that can send up some red flags. You want to also provide the most recent financials, and we do give a list in the application. Don't give us a 990 from 2 years ago. That's just not helpful. So we have review panels in the visual, literary, and performing arts. This year, we are making them even smaller so that each panelist has a small number of applications to review, so that they can really get into it and, give it their full attention. These panels are made up of our advisory board members, and then we also bring in guest artists who are, they're both for their expertise. We try to kind of look at our applicant pool, and like, if we don't have a dancer on our board, we bring in a dancer from the community. But it's also for the sake of transparency, so that we've got, other people that are not affiliated with the organization as a part of the process, and who can attest that we're, doing things in a fair and equitable way. Funding decisions are based on the quality of the application and not panelist knowledge of the organization. This is hard in a small town. Everybody knows everybody, and everybody knows every organization, but it's something I reiterate at the start of our review, which is that, you've got to look at what is on the paper in front of you and not your historical knowledge of the organization. So, write your application like you're brand spanking new and nobody knows who you are. The panelists review the applications ahead of our panel meetings, and they do a preliminary score. And then we have an in-person panel meeting where we talk about each applicant. It's very structured. It's very professional. We discuss the the positive about each application first, and then challenges second, and then everybody updates their score. So they have to be present for the in-person piece to have their score captured. That's a really important part of the whole process. And so if, you know, somebody's got to leave early or whatever, their score does not count for those organizations that they weren't there for. And then in August, so our panels will be in July, and then in August, we come together for our August board meeting, and that is when they decide how they're gonna fund this year. It's always based on the score, but some years it might be, you know, they want to spread the funding as far as possible, so people get, you know, a little less funding. Some years, like last year, I felt like it was more higher, fewer organizations, larger grants. So you know, that is up to them and how they feel like they should fund. So I never can predict which way that's going to go. So again, artistic quality is the most important factor. Community impact is also factored into the rubric. Multicultural aspect, I'll talk more about that in a minute. If you're a school, the educational impact, how's it tie into the curriculum? The ability to plan and implement. So, you know, is it clear in the application that initial homework has been done and that you've got plans in place, and it looks like if you get funded, you're going to, you know, very seamlessly be able to pull it off. The stability and the fiscal responsibility of the organization. And then need for the schools, the free and reduced lunch percentage is factored in to the grant score for our schools. So here's the rubric. For our nonprofits and municipalities, artistic merit's 30%, community impact 25%, program management's 15%, financial reviews 10%, the state priority funding is 10%, and then compliance is 10%. So compliance is those of y'all that have gotten grants in the past. You know your reports are due here in a few weeks, and we purposely require your reports to come in before we do our panels of the next year's applications so that we can make sure that you did what you were supposed to do, that you properly used our logo and the state logo and tagline. The state has this tagline that is required on everything, and it is always missed. And I put it on like everything, and it's always missed. So use the tagline. It's the tagline and the logo. And then with our schools, it's artistic merit, again, integration into the curriculum or enrichment. Those count equal, 40 and 40, and then the need counts 20%. So if you get funded, you'll get a grant contract through DocuSign. It's all online. You will be asked to do a final report. It's not overly complicated, and it's just at the end of the year, one report where we ask you, you know, how many people were served, what was the demographic breakdown of your audience, how many artists did you hire, especially the multicultural artists. You know, it's not anything crazy. As somebody that's got to fill out grant reports, and grant applications, I do try to make this as easy as possible on everybody while getting the information that we need. And there in this slide, you can see that tagline that is required by the state. Letters to our local legislators and commissioners, they're not required, but they are recommended, and they read them. I get emails all the time from our county commissioners saying, hey, I wanted to share this with you. I got it today. I don't necessarily get that correspondence from our state legislators, but I also know that they're paying attention. Our state legislators are very supportive of the arts and arts funding, and so it's just nice for them to get those letters and know that this is what that funding is going towards. And then we ask from time to time for you to participate in other things we have going on, show up at the county commissioner meeting when we do the Arts and Economic Prosperity Survey every 5 years. Please participate in that. It's hugely important, and we need your data. So just, if we need you to give us your input or advocacy, we just hope that you will do that. So some FAQs. For this year, just like last year, programmatic requests are going to be prioritized. We have a set amount of funding every year that has to be used to hire multicultural artists or fund arts organizations led and serving people of color. And in Orange County, we have very few arts organizations led by and serving people of color. And so that means in order for us to reach that multicultural requirement, it has to be through programs. So programs, and especially those that are hiring multicultural artists, are definitely going to jump to the top of the list. If you have applied for a grant through the Arts Council and you haven't found out yet, let me, I want to see your faces real quick. Is anybody awaiting news on state funding on this call? Okay. All right. Well, in case people are watching the recorded version of this, I will say, I would, if you've got the bandwidth, I would go ahead and apply, but we typically cannot fund organizations that are getting state funding. It is viewed in the eyes of the state as double dipping. So if you're getting funding from the Arts Council or the Department of Natural Cultural Resources, we generally can't fund you. Now, I've already said we do have that $29,000 that is allocated from the county. So therefore, we can use that to fund an organization that is being funded by the state. But again, I do feel like the board will probably say we need to allocate that $29,000 to organizations that aren't getting state support. But again, I never know. So if you've got the bandwidth to apply, you probably should, and we'll just cross that bridge when we get there. So the limit this year is $5,000 on programs or ops. If you have multiple projects or programs, I strongly recommend that you do multiple applications, because it just gets too muddy, especially if you need, actually, you really, in our application, you really cannot combine program and operating request in the same application, because when you check one box or the other, the questions change. So you definitely need to submit more than one application if you've got more than one request. So in terms of matching funds, in-kind donations of goods and services can be counted towards that one-to-one match. So if you've got a venue that is donating you space, or maybe you've got a local printer that is donating you, programs or posters, goods and services are great in-kind matches. We, however, do not want artists donating their time. We want artists to always be paid. And I know there's artists out there who will happily donate their time. Okay, but for every artist that's donating their time, that's another artist who needs to be paid. And not all artists are in the position of being able to donate their time. A lot of artists, this is their full-time gig and they need to be paid. So, if there's an artist that you really want to work with and they're like, I don't want to be paid, pay them anyway and ask them to donate it to another artist that is out there, hustling, trying to make a living doing this. Another question we get, when you get into if you're asking for program funding, you're going to have to do a budget for the program, and it has to be a zero-based budget. So your income equals your expense, and that is because we can't fund fundraisers. So if you're budgeting to make money, that's technically a fundraiser. We can't fund that. And then if you're budgeting to lose money, well, that's just not the best idea. And we're definitely not going to want to fund that. So that's why it's got to match. It's got to be zero, net zero. And then just general tips, just the main thing is knowing the whole purpose of the Grassroots Arts Program, and it's to ensure that every citizen has access to quality arts experiences. So, I touch on this at point 4, but in our community, to just expand on that, our needs are kind of still the same as they were when I got here 9 years ago. We need space. So organizations that are, our church that's on here, you are providing a critical resource. You're providing space for our artists to show their work. It's very hard to find in our community. And so that is a priority. And then equitable access, programs that are providing free experiences for all people in our community, or especially, historically marginalized communities. So important. We have a lot of opportunities in Orange County to experience the arts, but a lot of them also require money to do so. So, backing up, you want to be clear and concise. We've got word limits on all the fields on the application. Don't feel like you have to put in 500 words. If you can say what you need to say in 250 words, that's great. And then, try new things. It used to be the board was like, they didn't want to fund the same thing every year, with the exception of schools, because schools are a yearly rotating group of people who the program is new to. But I've seen that change over the years too, where if there's like a long-standing, very well-supported, well-known program in the community, I have seen them funding it year to year. But you just want to show how you're continuing to grow and improve. It doesn't really matter, how long we've been doing a certain program. Every year we can always make it better. So just make sure that you point those things out. So I mentioned the multicultural programming. This year, 72% of our grassroots funding has to go to support multicultural programs. So that is a big chunk. And it is in reference to who is being hired, not the audience or the population being served. So remember that too. And, the state puts everybody in a box. There is no box for biracial or multi-ethnic people. I don't quite understand why. So everything is, Black, Asian American, Latino, Latinx, Latin, Native American. And yeah, so I already mentioned you can put applications in for both operations and programs, but they might not both be funded. It depends on the pool. And again, for this year, I definitely suggest prioritizing programs. So one question that throws everybody on the application is is organization race? And again, this is a state requirement that we have to ask. It is not at all, factored into grant making decisions, but you need to answer that based on 50% or more of your staff, board, and membership. So even if you have a person of color as your ED, if the majority of your staff, board, membership, if you have a membership, is white, then you still need to identify as white. And then how do you find high quality artists or performers? I'm really excited to share that the Arts Center has revamped their arts and education program. So they are going to be working with area artists to get artists into our schools, especially, but they're really a resource for anybody that's wanting to book high quality artists. And they'll be handling block booking and doing that function that they did for many, many years pre-pandemic. So we are encouraging everybody to work with them. But we also have 2 other incredible programs here in the Triangle: Durham Arts Council CAPS and United Arts Council's Artists in Schools program. Oftentimes it's many of the same artists, they're all the teaching artists in the Triangle. So of course they're on everybody's roster, but I do encourage you to book through the Arts Center if you can. The zero-based budget only applies to your program budget, the program you're asking to fund. It does not apply to your organizational financials, which you have to also provide us. I'm honestly suspect if an organization ends up with a zero net at the end of a year. It's like, how'd you do that? There's always a smidge difference, right? So it does not apply to your organizational financials. But again, if you've got a deficit or surplus, make sure you explain that. So scholarships are not an allowable request. And the reason for that is because they are so subjective. The value that organizations place, it's just very hard to quantify. So what we recommend instead is to ask for funding for an expense associated with that program or class. So, money to pay the teacher, things like that. That's a much easier request for you to explain on paper and for our board to understand. All right, and then lastly, applications again are due on Monday, June 30th at 11:59. So I'm going to close this out, stop sharing, and then open it up to questions.
Yeah, I have a question. I don't know if Aisha wants to ask this question or I can ask this question. For the past 3 years, Frank Gallery has been working with Boomerang Youth. And during this last year, we had grants to a grant from Stroud Roses to develop art kits for suspension students at Boomerang Youth. So on meeting, we have completed those kits now, and they will be used by the Strive program that Aisha is very familiar with, and she can follow up on this. The question is this. Shelley Heimberger and I have developed these kits, so we have these skills. We are not minority artists, but we are going to be part of the evaluation process as these kits are used at Boomerang. But Boomerang also has a presence in middle schools in Orange County. And what we would like to also apply for with Tova Hairston, who is the ED, is a grant to not only work with the evaluation of these kits, which will take a while, and tweaking with the interns from Boomerang, which are all graduate students from the established schools like NC State, UNC, and NCCU. But also, we want to adapt the kits for use in the Boomerang School program. They have access to middle schools, and we would like to use our expertise of working with Boomerang for 3 years to make these adaptations for school kits. And Boomerang has slots in different schools. Is this allowed for Boomerang? Yes or no? It's complicated because they are going in for programming in the schools, but they're not part of the school itself.
And they would not be otherwise funded by the school.
They would not be funded by the school. They go in, and what they're trying to prevent is school suspensions.
Right.
And because the STRIVE program, as Aisha will tell you, has bases in Hillsborough, in Boomerang Hillsborough, and Boomerang Chapel Hill. So Aisha may want to follow up on that. But this is a question. I mean, the evaluation clearly has to be done by people who made the kits. So we're not minorities, but it's for minority students generally. So this is the issue.
I think so. I mean, the only thing that is pinging me is I just don't want it to be conflated with school supplies, because that, of course, isn't
school
fundable.
supplies. It would be part of the programming that Boomerang is developing, an extension also of their STRIVE program. It's called RISE.
So what would the grant actually be? What would you be using the grant for?
To pay the Frank artists.
To evaluate.
Yeah, to evaluate and to adapt program the kits also, not only for in Boomerang, when kids are suspended, they go to Boomerang for a week.
And these are artists of color with Frank?
No, it would be Shelley and me, only because we have been developing the kits. So it's very specialized. But we are also working with the Boomerang interns and staff, and most of them are people of color.
I think so.
Aisha, do you want to come in on that?
So again, I'm standing in just taking notes for Tova. I don't have details of the program you guys are developing, but right now we're still interviewing interns, so we don't know all demographics of interns for the next fiscal year as of yet. But normally it's a big mixture.
Yeah, I mean, all the testing, first of all, we've been working for a whole year with the students, with Tova Heston, with the students, and also adapting these kits that we have made for use in the Boomerang youth at Hillsborough and Chapel Hill. They also have shorter school program, which they'd like adapted kits for, and they're all arts-based. We are bringing in a huge arts component into the STRIVE program, and also it would be in the Boomerang program that they would be using in their school program.
I mean, I think it is a reasonable request. I never know exactly, but I think.
Yeah. When I will sit with Tova, and I understand the artistic merit and all this. I've been doing this a long time, as you know, Katie. So, the question is, we would not be asking for any school supplies. We would provide, Boomerang would be, and Frank would be providing the supplies and the artists to work with at base with Boomerang, who could eventually take the kids to schools.
Okay. I think so, Neris.
Okay. Thank you. Aisha, I'm meeting with Tova tomorrow, so that's very helpful that you said that. Thank you.
What other questions do we have? Okay, well, I will offer this. So last year, I try to give grant feedback when I can. It's becoming harder and harder to do that with the increased workload that we have here. And so but I don't want to go the way of other funders out there who do not offer feedback, because I know how frustrating that is. I get declined for grants all the time, and you're like, I want to know why. And when they're just like, we're not giving feedback at this point, I know that's a real bummer. So I did not get to give feedback this last time. So if anyone is on this call and did not get a grant, if you want to hang on, I will pull up last year's notes and let you know what happened. But otherwise, thank you all for being here. If you do have questions, shoot me an email and I will do my very best to answer them. Oh, and then Catherine, I did see your question. I will send you a recording of this. It'll also be on our website too for anybody to watch that wasn't able to attend. So thank you all for being here. And if you need last year feedback, then sit tight.
Thank you, Katie. Take care.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Neris.
Thank you.
Thanks, Katie.
Okay,
Thank
Asha.
you.